welcome to Dev Game Club bonus content. If you'd listened to the main cast, you might have heard me indicate that we were going to try to record a short segment just addressing a modernization of the game that we've been playing, which has been Fallout. So we turned to, I believe, 2014, maybe early 2015's Wasteland 2, which involved a lot of the same people. Tell us a little bit about it, Tim.
Yeah, I mean, they, In Exile, which is the company that Brian Fargo, I believe, is basically heading up, and he was also the executive producer or what have you, or studio head for the original Fallout, Black Isle, and that era. And so they're making a basically top-down isometric-y kind of, remake of, but in 3D, real-time 3D in the Unity engine. Of Wasteland, but Wasteland 2, and using that property instead of Fallout, of course, because that went over to Bethesda. And so it has turn-based combat, a lot of the same, systems and structure. Obviously not exactly the same because a lot of those went over to Bethesda at Fallout, but the spiritual successor, but also a direct sequel to Fallout or to Wasteland 1, right. which I played a little. I think both of us played a little bit of, and that goes way back to the 80s.
Yeah, that goes back to the late 80s. I in fact think I finished it with a couple of buddies over several weekends. Yeah,
I don't think I ever finished it, but I played it.
I didn't remember too much about it, but we definitely finished it. We were crowded around a computer in a dorm room, reading from the little booklet. One of the features of Wasteland, and it was something we mentioned in the main cast, was that you had a book that came along with it because they probably have the memory for all the text for all these locations you'd be, and at certain points it would just say turn to entry 57, and you'd get something descriptive, like something a DM might say, like you see this grizzled old man and blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
And it was great. It was a weird kind of hodgepodge experiment, but it really allowed them to deliver on some good writing, which they couldn't do. Really didn't even have screen real estate for in the original game.
And in this, In Exile re-released Wasteland 1 and kind of did some updates to it and polished it up and did some high-res images from the original and stuff. So it's actually a pretty good port. And for those entries, they actually voiced them and they have a narrator reading those same entries, and they come up dynamically inside the game now. So you don't need the physical booklet. Which, mixed about, because that booklet was kind of a cool, unique thing. But it's definitely cool to hear, like you said, that GM or DM kind of, narration of what you're seeing.
Yep.
Because it's all very, very low res stuff.
I actually found it held up pretty well. The one thing I think that wasn't terrific was the combat originally was all sort of Bardtail style, where you have a window, or early Ultima games sort of style, where you had a window and you were just doing stuff and it was telling you what happened, but you didn't have individual characters. There's no tactical turn-based stuff like in Fallout. Turning to Wasteland 2, that fully incorporates a grid-based, not hex-based, but a grid-based tactical combat where only one character can occupy any given square on the screen. Although the rest of the time it's fully, a floating point. You can be wherever on the screen. So it's a really interesting way to bring that forward, I thought.
Yeah, I'm so far. I mean, I've only played a little bit, maybe hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, and I'm just delighted by Wasteland 2. I feel like a lot of the usability and kind of automation of things that I kind of wanted Fallout 1 to have is in here, from a modern game development and design perspective. I think the combat is, and a lot of the UI that they've added in is really helpful to how you're progressing through any combat encounter.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a lot of streamlining and such. But then the other thing I'm actually pretty surprised by, and I haven't played long enough to really get into it, but if you do some poking around in the menus and on the character sheets and stuff, like there are a lot of stats and systems in there, like a lot of skills. I think I'm going to start over because I just took the default group just to kind of race through it a little bit. So I think I'm going to go back and make my own group, but it's pretty daunting about how to actually spec and your characters out and what skill points you want to use. So I got to hand it to him for that.
It is a slow burn of a game.
Yeah,
I mean,
it seems like
so one of the things I was concerned about with Fallout was when you had too many characters that you had to manage. I commented on like Temple of Elemental Evil and how having lots and lots of options and multiple characters to deal with became overwhelming. Here it's more, there's not as many options as far as that goes. I mean, it's basically different ranges of combat. You're going to basically do your one attack, whatever that is, what kind of gun you use or whatever. But you have different ranges that you're going to do that from. One addition I think is really, really nice to the formula is it does your action point management for you. It will show you when you go to move. You can move this far and still be able to shoot or attack if you use a melee weapon. So it puts down a blue grid, but then it puts down a larger yellow grid, which basically displays, but if you want to use all your action points on movement, this is how far you could go.
Got it. Yeah, that's okay. I didn't quite grok that when I was playing.
Right.
So
it's basically go up to this line and no further, and you can still shoot.
Yeah.
Which is a wonderful addition because that's the sort of thing that in the Fallout, the original Fallout in particular, I would find myself, oh man, I went one step too far. And now I guess I'm going to use my inventory this turn, because at that point you can't do anything, and there's no going back.
Yeah.
There's no going back here either. There's no undo, like I didn't mean to do that, but it does give you that sort of like information that was missing.
Yeah. I mean, it's just a lot of, and since Fallout 1 came out, there's been a lot of good tactical, combat games since then. So I think everyone's been and I haven't made one of those myself, but I think everyone in that space has been slowly, inching forward in usability. So I think they learned a lot from that. And these folks in particular, because they were, from after Fallout 1, at Black Isle for a while, and some of them went to Obsidian, and now they're in Exile and stuff. So they've been doing this themselves for quite a while. But it feels like a good culmination of a lot of the different things. One of the other things I loved about some of the tidbits of playing Wasteland 1 and 2 back to back is they have some direct connections between the two from the original game. Like some of the characters are actually, that were in your party in Wasteland 1 back in the 80s.
If you chose the default party then.
If you chose the default party, are actually there in the town, which I think is cool, and some good homages there. And then FMV opening cinematic, which is crazy.
That was insane to see.
Yeah.
I was not expecting that in the least. It has a good opening, where you're basically at a funeral, but the funeral is FMV, which is totally unexpected. It looks like they got together a dozen good cosplayers who do this sort of post-apocalyptic stuff, and film them, which is, these days, as expensive as it is to animate a 3D character at like that level of fidelity, it might actually be cheaper.
I think it'd be cheaper. Yeah, I think especially if they're getting fans. Yeah, it's kind of brilliant in a way.
Or to scale, at least. I mean, they had like a dozen characters, so a dozen actors are way cheaper than a dozen individually ZBrushed and textured and etc. 3D characters. So it's an interesting choice, but I think a strong one.
And I haven't delved into it too much, but I noticed they have a sort of a crafting kind of system in there, at least a light one where you can modify your weapons and deconstruct your weapons and stuff. So I feel like
that's and that's something that's shown up in later Fallouts in New Vegas and in Fallout 4 especially.
Yep.
The other thing I wanted to point out, and this is also a carryover from Fallout, is that there are real consequences here as well. And I know you haven't gotten there yet, but there is a point, and it's very well orchestrated, and it's basically scripted, I think, to do this, where you have a choice. Two towns need your help, and you have to pick one or the other. And the way that plays out, and I don't want to spoil it for you, but was very satisfying to me.
Cool.
And really tugged at me. And I'm a few more hours in than you are. I'm maybe 4 or 5 hours in. And I found that extremely compelling. A great way to bring this forward. One of the things that I sometimes lament about RPGs is that it's the world revolves around you problem.
Mm-hmm.
And while I would say the world is still going to revolve around you here in the Wasteland 2, they are nonetheless making it revolve around you in such a way as it sounds like it doesn't.
Yeah.
And that, of course, it's all smoke and mirrors in video games. We've talked about that before, but the particular brand of smoke that they're using here, I really, really admired.
Yeah, and I think one of the other interesting differences, though, that to that point, a little bit of between Wasteland, which I had forgotten about from Wasteland 1, and they carry over into Wasteland 2, but was not really a focus as much in Fallout 1 or 2, and sort of a little bit kind of brought into 3, and I haven't played 4 yet, but is group versus solo. They really lean into your party, right? You have 4 members that are all can be as different as you want them to be, and Wasteland 1 was that as well. And rather than just companions,
right. And so the player controls all of them.
Yeah, the player controls all of them. You're not playing one. Yeah, you're playing the group of rangers essentially, which is a difference, and I'm glad that they kept that as really kind of a differentiator from the Fallout franchise, which tends to be you have people with you or companions and stuff, but it's not really a full system of a grouping system,
right? And you can't direct them, and most importantly,
right?
And
and
this as well, as it turns out, they can go rogue.
Interesting. So they have a morale or something.
Well, they have it seems like so. One of the characters that comes back from the original Wasteland is Angela Death. They had all these kind of punny names in Wasteland. Angela Death, if she's in your party, she can come along with you. Maybe because I'm playing on easy, because I wanted to get through a bunch of it. But if she comes along with you, she will get pissed at various times and just go off and make her own decisions, which mostly is good because she's way overpowered compared to you at the beginning of the game. So it kind of is okay that she's doing her own thing. But it's I was going to go and do this, and she just went this other way, and I guess we're in the shit now. So it's pretty amusing. I've since picked up another follower who most of the time I control, but also has roughly a 30% chance, I guess, to just play independently in combat.
How funny! Yeah, that's good to know. Then that there's some of that variability. Then that you don't have full control over.
It keeps an edge to it, because one of the things about tactical turn-based games is they have this pace that is very much player-driven. And basically when you get to their turns, it's and now they do this crazy shit.
Right.
It's now this character who you normally control and you normally have this slow pace with suddenly does things 3 times faster than you normally would. And probably makes better decisions than you do because they actually compare all the numbers, where I'm just well, this guy's closest.
Right. Another funny little system, which I don't think was in Wasteland 1, but I guess I will call it the ass system. Did you notice
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I know. We're trying to be a clean show, but they have this attribute that each of the characters has in dialogue choices. Smart ass, badass, and I don't remember the kick-ass. Kiss-ass, right. Yeah, so they're basically different tonal, responses that each character will have during dialogue options, and each of the 4 characters in your party can have different scores in each of those. And so you can have the one that's always going to say the badass thing, or the kiss-ass or whatever, and it basically adds those different options to your dialogue choices, but it's per character, which I think is interesting. I'm really interested to see how that comes, to pass later on, when those scores are higher and stuff, because, you could have one of your characters focus on kiss ass and one, be the badass. And I'm assuming the badass one will eventually piss somebody off, what I mean? Yeah. And be exiled from the group.
Basically intimidate, interrogate, and ingratiate is basically what it comes down to.
Right.
Yeah, it's pretty amusing, and I've been very, one of the things that happens, of course, is you level up, and I've been like, well, how many points do I want to put into the dialogue options, and because it doesn't take long before, like, you're not getting a lot of skill points per level, so it doesn't take long before those points are very dear, and you're sort of like, oh man, wouldn't mind putting some more into this dialogue type, but
yeah,
I really got to improve those guns or whatever,
Yeah.
I don't even nobody lockpicks, or whatever. So you've got hard decisions right out of the gate, about stuff like that, which is just fabulous.
Yeah, and I will say on the engine side, I was surprised to see that it was in Unity. I didn't know that. But it works fine. I mean, they're doing a good job at it. It seems pretty optimized, and it's turn-based, which I think is good. And the camera perspective is modest, and I think appropriate for the kind of game. So they have a good control over what they're rendering and such. And there's fog of war, and it's just really, and in Exile, my understanding is they're really not that big of a company. They're basically indie, and this was a Kickstarter, I think.
Yes, it was. And I think they've since kickstarted a Wasteland 3. Actually.
Yeah, which I think, I think I bet you they learned a lot from 2, and so I bet 3, has a good chance of being pretty good as well. So I'm happily delighted, especially just finishing Fallout 1 and kind of wanting more of it, but not necessarily wanting to play Fallout 2 because I've played Fallout 2, but also it's like going kind of backwards. And right. I feel like Wasteland 2 is it does feel like you're going forward in as far as design goes. So.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really fun. I like to see that they are also doing the Torment update. Mm-hmm. It's called Torment Tides of Numenera, and then they also have the Bard's Tale license, so they are doing a 4th Bard's Tale game. And that's interesting because they're different. All 3 of these are different kind of feeling games. So
didn't they also do Pillars of Eternity?
I believe they did, yes.
Which is basically their Baldur's Gate type game. Right?
Yep, I think that's right.
So they're going back to the well that they are kind of the experts in a lot of ways, right, from back in the day. So I applaud them for that.
Actually, now I'm thinking that might have been Obsidian who did that.
Yeah, maybe it was.
But this is all like a particular group of RPG makers. All these games that have been together. That worked together for a long time. Chris Avallone has been involved in a lot of these titles. He's a writer, who has worked on some of our favorite games, including Torment. So, really interesting. Really interesting to play this game. It has, it feels like it's pulled forward a lot of the ideas that were in Fallout. Just especially looking at that enormous list of skills. It is, because you have a whole party, it can afford to be more finicky with just giving you a few points to split up. I think that's the choice that they make there. When you have one character, you give them a lot of points so that you have a lot of options. And it can lead to feeling like, okay, and now I have the character who can do everything. Where here you have definite specialization between the characters, which I think is a really terrific feel for a party game. It's, even though most of the time these roles aren't as varied as they are in a D&D game. Like, everybody basically uses guns and have different ranges, but they basically all use the same sort of attack, which really helps me. They still all have their specialties that they do mostly outside of combat. So I really appreciate that. And the storytelling so far has been great. So
they've got a good humor in there. Seems like kind of coming over, and the tone of it, feels, it's got a great post-apocalyptic Western feel to it. I think there's kind of the cowboy action going on, which I had forgotten, but was a big part of Wasteland 1 as well. Which they either obviously updated the music or something, but because the Wasteland 1 music I think is amazing so far in what I've played, and it definitely is higher quality than it was back in the day. Yeah. So they rescored it or something. And also, as an aside to correct myself, Pillars of Eternity was Obsidian. You're right. So,
I thought so.
Yeah.
But Terrific stuff.
Yep.
Really nice to see some different progeny of the Fallout feel. Not just the IP, but actually just taking that sort of style of RPG forward. I would say on the PC, the last couple of years, we've been experiencing yet another renaissance in this area.
Yeah.
And it's not something I've looked at too hard, but now that I've played some Wasteland 2, it's something I want to look at a lot more.
Yep. Hours and hours and hours of stuff out there. I've heard
Absolutely.
Pillars of Eternity is quite long as well.
Yeah. So yeah, it's been a good time. I think that's where we'll call it for the bonus content. Thanks for joining us, and have a great weekend.
Good night.